Steve Ferrugia's been going on a tear recently about how things that get called technologies are really products, which I'm very sympathetic to. But also that they're nothing products, like the vendor is just releasing them and telling, here, you figure it out what this is good for, kind of a thing. And they get away with that, I think, by calling them technologies. Because, like a technology just represents a capability. It's like I've said before about features and how they're the basic, economic unit of software. It's the feature because it nominally represents a capability for the user on one side and a unit of work for the developer on the other. But you can retcon anything into a feature, and because I'm old enough to remember MySpace Bling, it's like the ability to inject HTML markup into your profile on MySpace, which was unambiguously a bug. It was the result of crappy Cold Fusion code. But of course, the people at MySpace, and especially MySpace users, were embraced it as a feature. But Steve has also been recently invoking concepts like use cases and product market fit. So product market fit is when you've made your product and then you're trying to find somebody to buy it. Interesting to note that the term was popularized by Mark Andreessen, although he didn't coin it. Perhaps a little more interesting, though, is use case, which was coined by ostensibly by Ivar Jacobson in 1987. And the original concept looks like it just means scenario. It's pretty narrowly scoped. It really just describes the dynamics of a single interaction. From the text of the paper, a use case is a special sequence of transactions performed by a user and a system in dialogue. Yeah, so it's just the mechanics of a particular click here to get the thing or whatever. But of course, nowadays it's invoked retroactively. So you've made the thing. What's your use case? Just one side remark about this though. In my own research, I've had to look at a lot of old computer science literature, and it's really remarkable how stuff of this vintage really just shows how people were thinking about the well-being of users. I have a copy of Software Engineering Economics by Barry Boehm, and the first chapter he talks about a system that he was making for a school for attendance or something like that, and how it was that the women in the office who were basically the system was originally intended to replace, their kids went to that school and they were single mothers, and the only way that they could get some time with their kids during the day was they were literally in the same building. And he's like, well, if we make this thing a certain way, they're going to all lose their jobs, and they're not going to have that access anymore. So there was a consideration, a very humane consideration just in there, baked into the thing. And I don't really see that kind of thing anymore so much. It's sort of all desiccated out, and now it's it's just the technical considerations. Nowadays, of course, you just develop the capability first, and then you figure out what it's good for, or rather, you just foist it on the users. And so I've been thinking about this in contrast to my own work, because I've gone and made a very generic thing on top of an even more generic thing. And furthermore, I made it from the inside out, starting with the capability rather than starting with a pain point on the part of the user. Although now that I just said that, I don't know if that's true. Like there were definitely pain points, but they were my pain points. Like in the case of Sense Atlas, it was that I found the process of establishing and maintaining conceptual integrity in projects was just really, really burdensome. Like the amount of reporting and the amount of stat, like just it was a lot of work just to get that, and then of course you get signal loss, and people would go off and do different stuff, or they would misinterpret things, or what have you. Or you would just try to steamroll forward without even having an idea of what forward was. And then on top of that, layered on top of that, you would have these reporting requirements by the boss or whatever would want to know that you were making progress, and then the question was like, making progress doing what? And so Sense Atlas is really sort of just born out of wanting to make that process like just less of a freaking gong show. And then intertwingler, the motivation is simple. It's to facilitate making tools like Sense Atlas. And in fact, I would say like intertwingler is like mainly like opinion driven software, to the extent that it makes different decisions about how to organize and cut up the job. And something like Sense Atlas would be like insufferably difficult to write if not for intertwingler, because intertwingler is pretty much arranged to take a lot of the pain out of making things. It has to do with like the ability to connect like arbitrary things to each other, really, and to be able to transform things, and just being able to make it less of a pain in the ass to do that, and so that I can focusing on the data semantics. Like that's kind of like the point of intertwingler. So yeah, like another aspect of so-called product market fit or use cases, I think, is just reconciling the story, right? So that my story about why I made the product intersects with your story. Anyway, gonna finish my coffee.